So very nice to see you, Jim, and thank you for doing this. And I don't want to burn the time on your panel, but there's been a lot of talk already over the last day and a half, almost 2 days, about how do you actually get the board involved? How do you get your stakeholders involved? How do you show the value of the cybersecurity strategy? What do you do to get people? In fact, in the last session, talked about maybe a board spot on someone on the board being designated as being the caretaker for cybersecurity. And before I turn it over to you, I do want to recognize someone who's going to be on your panel. So Andres Ruz, I want to just give a shout out to Andres. He's been a great core supporter. And Andy, looking forward to this presentation with Jim. Over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Umesh. I appreciate the time. Yeah, we're really proud to have Andy on the team, and I think this discussion is going to go right down the middle of the strategy road, right? When it comes to making strategic cybersecurity decisions and figuring out whether or not they've been effective for you. So we appreciate everyone taking the time to listen in on the discussion, and hopefully some of this will help prepare you to meet the very real challenges that your businesses may be currently facing. I have 4 guests today, 2 from the enterprise side and 2 from the vendor ecosystem. Today, representing the enterprise side of the discussion, I'm joined by 2 outstanding IT leaders. Roger Lee, CIO at Aguirre and Fields, an engineering firm here in Houston. Hey, Roger.
Hey, good afternoon.
And then also Owen Cheney, CIO at Moody Bank. Hey, Owen.
Hi, Jim.
All right, and providing perspective from the security products and services side, we're also joined by Rick Peters, CISO Operational Technology North America with Fortinet. How you doing, Rick?
Good afternoon, Jim. Pleasure.
Good to see you. And then, of course, the infamous Andy Roos, Director of Information Security here at Meriplex. We're glad to have you, Andy.
Hola, Jim. Hi, guys. How are you?
Pretty good. So why don't we start with a quick introduction so everybody gets to know each of you just a little bit better. Roger, why don't you tell us a little bit about your professional background and maybe something that means a lot to you?
Okay. Yeah. So I have been doing technology work since really 1998. In 1999, actually co-founded what was then known as an application service provider, hosting company. We hosted an ERP package. I sold that business in 2015 and joined Aguirre and Fields.
Wow.
And through my career, really what my personal mission, if you will, personal goal has been to change the perspective of IT, how IT is viewed, particularly around customer experience.
Nice.
What I found in talking to many of the clients that we had, they tried to avoid their internal IT, and I wanted to turn that around and make IT more approachable and more of a customer service organization and a real partner to the business.
That's great. Thanks for that. Owen, how about you?
Yeah, well, I've been here at Moody Bank for the last 14 years as CIO, and I've pretty much been in banking all of my career, either at a bank or at a vendor in the banking industry. I've been with AMG Bank here in Houston, Klein Bank, Pearland State Bank. I also spent 1 year in the manufacturing arena at Goodman Manufacturing here in Houston. They're air conditioning manufacturers. They're information security officer. They had just gone public and needed to comply with SOX. Helped them with that, and I moved back in the banking industry. And then I think a couple months after that, they went back private again. They had enough SOX. So yeah, all the regulations. So looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, we'll get to compliance a little later, won't we? I appreciate that. Hey, Rick, tell us a little bit about you and all those hole-in-ones you have on the wall behind you.
Yeah, I wish. I'm the only one in my family who doesn't have a hole-in-one. How about that?
Oh, man. You'll get it. You'll get it.
Yeah, the Lord has a strange sense of humor. Anyway, I'm Rick Peters. I'm the CISO for Operational Technology for North America. I've been with Fortinet about 3 years. Always focused on operational technology. One of the challenges that I was excited about taking on, I closed out 38 years with the U.S. intelligence community, specifically the National Security Agency, and at the end of 2017, There I was an engineer. I led cyber operations both in the exploitation side for ICS SCADA as well as the defense of critical infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose today you'd say I'm living with my sins. But actually it's a treat to be able to work on the problem up close and have a chance to raise the bar across the community and on operational technology, and really for IT and OT because they've converged so quickly.
Appreciate that, Rick.
You bet.
Glad you're here. Andy, Super Andy, as we like to call him, tell everybody about all of your amazing attributes, buddy.
Well, I don't know. You need to ask my wife about that. She will disagree with you about all the amazing attributes. So, well, my name is Andres Ruz. Everyone call me Andy. I think that's a combination of not pronouncing correctly my name, but the true story is from Tom Home. They call me Andy. So I think over there they could not pronounce my name either. So I just graduated from school and I started a job with my degree. Now that's a lie. So 20 years of experience in IT. And InfoSec, like Roger, since NT version 4, probably doing stuff in the infrastructure field. And I specialized in security for the last, in those times, we didn't call it cybersecurity or all these fancy names. It was just part of IT operations. I remember my first firewall with IP change was probably when I was 21 years old, right? So since then, up to now, it has changed so much. So I specialize in this. I have an MBA in MIS, 7 certificates, 4 of them in security.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. And a little bit about me for the audience. I'm the Vice President of Core Technology here at Meriplex. I've been here for about 2.5 years. And Andy is on my team, on the Core Technology team. He heads up our cybersecurity division. We are a Fortinet partner, and we work with these with Roger Lee and with Owen on their security solutions. And we enjoy the opportunity to bring Andy and his expertise and some of our partners together. And we appreciate this forum that Umesh has invited us to. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the businesses involved here and in recent strategic initiatives. Roger, can you give us a quick overview of Aguirre and Fields and any recent security initiatives you've been working on?
Yeah, so I think what I always like to start with is when I describe our company as our purpose, because we're very much a purpose-driven company. And really, Aguirre and Fields exists to provide our communities with leaders who have great character and leverage innovations in the infrastructure solutions. So we do roadway design transportation projects and that's such. And our commitment really is to our communities, and we believe part of that is keeping this data, this design work that we're doing safe. So over the past really 3 to 4 years, several of our partners, teaming partners, and other vendors in the industry had been hit with ransomware. And actually 5 or 6 years ago, before I was here, Aguirre and Fields was hit with ransomware as well. And so we started little by little trying to implement some security controls. And then last year we decided, we need to get more organized about this. So one of the key initiatives in the company this year was to implement an information security program. So we reached out to our friends at Meriplex and said, hey, we're ready to get organized. We're ready to be a lot more deliberate about this. And was introduced to Andy, and just knew that he was the perfect fit for us. He got our culture right away. He dove right into our business. And we'll get into some of the compliance stuff later, I'm sure. But he helped us uncover and really develop a plan and then implementing the program. So I would say that's been our key initiative.
A formalized IT program for the business has been a focus this year for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Specifically around security, yeah.
Specifically around that, absolutely. Owen, with Moody Bank.
Yeah, I don't know that we had any big initiatives. It's a lot of, the blocking and tackling, just keeping up with the day-to-day. As Roger mentioned, ransomware has been so prevalent recently. So earlier in the year, we looked at our backup strategy because that's what you're going to use to recover. You don't have to pay people, and just made sure that, that was secure. We were getting everything we needed, getting it at the frequency we needed it, keeping up with the patch management routine, just all the general things that you need to do day to day. I think that's been our focus, just shoring up those things, making sure they're getting done.
Yeah, it's a huge component to the whole process. I was looking at some of the earlier presentations and saw some good outlines of the different phases of preparing for incident response and how you implement some of those countermeasures. And a lot of those countermeasures have to do with that blocking and tackling, exactly like you were saying.
Yeah, I was listening to the presentation, the healthcare presentation prior to us. They were saying we're the #1 attack group, and I'm like, I feel like banks are pretty high up on the list. We got the money, we got the accounts, everything. So everybody wants to get access to us somehow, some way.
I completely agree. I think data is money in all kinds of different verticals. I think it's a good point. So when it comes to initiatives and the actual as you said, you're doing the blocking and tackling, but budgeting security solutions, you have to convince a lot of people, right, of where you need to spend the money and whatnot. How do you approach that at Moody Bank? Your cybersecurity budgeting. Do you have a specific budget for that? Do you tie that to a business objectives? Can you give us some perspective on that?
Sure. Yeah, and we don't have. It's part of the general IT budget, and we look at lots of things in developing that. And we're in budget season right now, so this is a great time to talk about it. And we try to do some kind of gap analysis each year and look at what we're doing. We have multiple tools that we use for that. We have a good relationship with our audit department and our external audit, and they kind of help us when they come in. They tell us what they're seeing in other institutions, other businesses, where we might have some weaknesses. We look at vendors like Meriplex and other vendors and get feedback from them. And then we do, we're highly regulated. We're going to talk about that later, but we have some tools that the regulators have created for us. One's called the Cybersecurity Assessment Tool that has 492 questions in it. And we can look at that. And it's actually a decent tool, surprisingly, from the government.
We can look at work.
Yeah. And it'll map us from baseline to innovative, and we can see where we can fall in that. And then you can say, okay, to get to the next level, which questions did I answer no on? And then you can go back and say, well, what would it take to flip that to yes? Does that make sense for Moody Bank to do? Some of the things don't make sense for a bank our size. They only make sense for a Chase or a B of A to do. But some of them, we probably do need to look at. So we do a gap analysis and prioritize those things and get that information from multiple sources. Forums like this and other industry user groups are also a good source to hear what other people are doing out there, because that's kind of the best thing in the industry is what works at another bank. It's a good chance it's going to work at our bank versus something that we're trying to do when we're the first ones in our industry or whatever trying to use that. So getting feedback from other institutions and user groups.
Yeah, no need to reinvent the wheel, right? Make sure that you're following industry standards and whatnot. I'm glad you brought up, some of the regulatory tools, industry vertical specific ways that you, as an institution, look at your budgets and obviously your gap analysis. How is that different for you, Roger, with Aguirre and Fields? Do you have a different approach in the engineering vertical to your needs?
It's a little. I think it is a little bit different for us because of the way that we ultimately win work. And the way that we win work, because it is for the public, is it's qualification based. So we don't even do any scoping and feeing when we're putting a proposal in to win a project. It's really just purely based on qualifications. So we do a self audit annually to come up with what we call our overhead rate, and then we're able to use the overhead rate to negotiate with our clients on the scope and fees of projects. And obviously IT is part of that. And if our overhead rate is higher than what their threshold is, then we sort of just have to eat that part of it. And I go back to our purpose, which is we want to be leaders and innovators, and so we're okay with that. When we look at IT spend, which security is obviously, cybersecurity is obviously part of that. We don't have a specific bucket for just security. It's just all one big IT bucket. Mm-hmm. But we look at our industry, and they typically spend between 3 to 5% of their revenue on technology. And what we decided was we wanted to be at the top end of that, and frankly, we're even much higher than that.
Okay.
On our IT spend. So we actually being in IT at Aguirre and Fields is awesome because we do have a pretty generous budget, and for that reason, we're able to invest quite a bit into security. Because again, we want to serve our communities the best that we can, and a big part of that is keeping their data safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. Do you find yourself capitalizing or expensing on the OpEx side your security solutions? Is there a preference for your business or your board? Do you see anything there changing, or has anything changed about how which bucket it comes out of?
So yeah, good question. So the funny thing is, we do prefer to capitalize. We like to spread the value over years. Mm-hmm. What we decided though for security is that we prefer an OpEx. Mm-hmm. Frankly, because the skill set needed to properly manage, execute, and monitor is pretty high, and it evolves, and the technology does as well. So in this case, an OpEx made more sense for us.
That's great.
Side.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Owen, how about at Moody Bank?
Yeah, banks tend to want to capitalize things as well. We have money in a vault downstairs, so why would we need to do that? But kind of like Roger was saying, a lot of things are moving to a subscription-based type service where you can get it cheaper by having somebody else that can leverage the efficiencies across multiple customers on a subscription basis. So then you're paying a monthly run rate for some kind of monitoring or some kind of tool out there. So it turns into an OpEx. It's kind of been trending in that direction more and more recently.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let's ask some of our industry experts. Rick, what are the trends you're seeing in budgeting, for cybersecurity efforts, and have you seen that change over the past 3 years?
I actually have. It's a great question. I'll start with OT simply because it's now connected, right? You're hearing a lot about convergence of IT and OT,
right?
And that acceleration towards converging them has been driven by the very thing that everyone's been talking about: the desire for more data, decision making, accelerated, efficient business processes, and understanding how all of that works. That sounds great, but then you've got to look at the other side of the equation, which is you got a very expanded attack surface, particularly on the OT side, because of all the legacy technology. You've got aging infrastructure, not uncommon in oil and gas, energy. So energy manufacturing to see technologies, capabilities are 20, 30 years old. And, top of mind for them is performance, safe and continuous operations. And now I'm bringing the IT folks into the game, and their value systems are different. Again, the IT folks say, hey, we've been practicing a long time. We understand how to do it. We have a CIA model that's trusted. It works great. We have all these best practices, and the OT guys are building fences. to keep them out. So it's trying to merge and marry those, and at the same time have that conversation with the C-suite executives to have them understand what does their return on investment look like, because they're looking for cross-cutting return. They want to understand what's my gain going to be. I need to have a sustainable return, and whatever I'm going to spend that resource on had better churn into productivity on the OT side. So it's kind of a new thought process. I mean, everyone's aware of all of the cases out there of loss, right? You can read all about them. There's a ton of them out there. I think 2020 exacerbated the situation. We were heading into it. Proliferation of enabled technology was becoming top of mind with all the IoT and IIoT product out there. I think the last count, roughly 6 billion, 30 billion plus actually was the last count when I was reading about it. So you have to worry about understanding how you're maintaining your environment, your enterprise from a visibility perspective, and that requires great attention. So there's much at stake. And the last point I'll make is leaders are recognizing, we're now seeing cybersecurity show up as top 5 and better than 70% of those we poll and survey. So it is a rising concern, exacerbated by everything that's gone on with the innovation acceleration as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, all great points, Rick. I appreciate that. Lots of rabbit holes to go down there.
Yes.
But I definitely think that the rising nature of the visibility and some of the things you described are related to just the different mindsets as OT is merging with IT in a lot of areas is something for a lot of companies to think about, especially in those sectors. Andy, can you give us your perspective on budgeting within these different verticals and the evolution of enterprise cybersecurity budgeting, where you see it?
Yeah, so thank you, Jim, for the question, and everyone has very good points. I think we found two things, right? In the traditional way, the CapEx model everyone was very used to that, but there's two things that are happening. One is your CFO sometimes is asking you to change the way that you are expensing some of these big items. And the other thing is the vendors are asking you. So this is coming from two different fronts. In some cases, it's internal requests, but in some other cases, the request is coming directly from the vendor. The best example I can find is Office 365, right? In the past, you used to buy the big licenses for your Exchange server and everything. Now it's a subscription-based model that you have to pay pretty much every month, and you don't have an option now. That's what you will consume. So I think the industry overall is going in that way, and even if we don't like it, I think that we're going to transition to that OpEx model for the future. Now, when you talk about budget season and we prepare for budget, for me, something extremely important, and both Roger and Owen know this because I talked to them about multiple times about the subsidies. You have to relate risk to budget. There's a correlation there that you cannot not get alignment between where your company is going, what is the risk of your organization, and quantifying somehow that so your budget makes sense. There's way too much noise in our industry that a lot of people has the latest and the burst, and if you install this, nothing will happen to your organization, and that's really not true. So what you have to do is you have to do your homework. You have to analyze what are the key things, as Owen was saying, what are the key things for my bank, that makes sense for me to deploy, that will give me to the best next step. Or Roger and I work on this almost every week. What are the key things that we have to move on to make sure that that's going to deliver the value to the organization that the organization require?
Yeah, that's great points. Especially linking risk to budget. It's a critical piece when it comes to running any business. As we all know, running a business is just a series of risk management decisions, right? Whether it's on the security side or the operational side or wherever it may be, in the relationships and the vendors that you deal with. So, let's talk a little bit more operational now that we've talked about the budgets and the money and the different approaches there. When you're evaluating the effectiveness of a cybersecurity initiative within your organization, there's a lot of noise in the space these days where people are selling products that'll do everything for you, or they'll be driven specifically by one risk per se. Okay, and there's everything in between. Okay. I think it's important for us to discuss how leadership teams evaluate their security solutions, and how do they know that they're getting the bang for the buck that they're looking for? Are they meeting? Is it meeting your needs? Right. Roger, have you gone through this exercise with the leadership team at Aguirre and Fields recently?
Yeah, we have, and I'll say, first and foremost, we consider security really at the foundation of being able to manage and create the infrastructure solutions we're ultimately producing. So we see it as a critical component of it. And we do look at it from also from the perspective of what's the cost of downtime. So we evaluate this is how much it's going to cost if we're down. And so some of the things we do in the security realm sort of look at it like insurance. It's not foolproof, obviously, but that's a perspective we take on it. And then to help quantify it, we did come up, and Andy was a great deal of help in this, come up with a way of measuring our security maturity. And so that's a metric we're definitely tracking, and that encompasses many data points from we've implemented certain security controls that are directly aligned with our business objectives. And so based on the business objectives, we decided we need these security controls to make sure that we can meet those objectives. So we're giving ourselves a grade essentially on how well we're progressing on those security controls, and we're factoring in long and short-term solutions that we're implementing. So in the end, we have a maturity goal that we're trying to achieve, and we're measuring our progress as we tick towards it.
So it's quantifiable. You're using a quantifiable approach to the efficacy of your programs.
Exactly.
That's excellent. Owen, how about your team?
Yeah, I'll talk about it in two areas. One is how do we measure what we currently have, and then how do we measure new systems or innovations.
Sure.
When we're trying to do some of the things that Roger talked about in having statistics that we're looking at to see, how efficiently, how quickly, how many systems are getting patches, looking at our reports on our backups, looking at certain statistics from the event logs, phishing. We do monthly phishing tests of all of our employees, statistics on that. Some of that we group together and we take to the board, but some of that's just internal, looking at how good we're doing internally. It gets a little trickier in looking at new products out there because I think Andy mentioned it. There's a lot of noise. I probably get 10 vendor calls a day trying to sell the latest and greatest whatever it is that's going to solve all of our problems, and I don't have time to investigate them all. So that's one where kind of referrals, like I mentioned before, either coming from one of your business partners or another company that have a network with, and then doing a proof of concept on any new system or application, and putting it through the test and saying, okay, you said it's going to do this. Well, put it in here for 14 days or 30 days, and let's see if it lives up to. And if they stand by their product, they should be willing to do that.
Absolutely. Great points. I agree. Lots of noise. Measuring. You mentioned that you even put some of these measurements in front of your board.
Yeah, we started quarterly. I go to the board now and do a cybersecurity presentation. This is I don't know if we started late last year, but all of 2020 I've been doing that. And so it's getting easier to get the funds, versus 10 years ago. You get cybersecurity and they're like, what's that? Why do we need to worry about that? And now there's a much more awareness, because there are so many things in the news and things going on, and it is insurance. It's something that, hey, you don't want to have to use. We wish we didn't have to do this, but the cost of not having it is so much greater.
Yeah, they tend to take care of the locks on the vaults. They should probably lock the virtual vaults too, huh? That's important. So Andy, as a service provider, what types of questions are you getting from the customer base regarding prioritization and effectiveness of security solutions?
Yeah, this is a good question, and this is something that a lot of our customers have big struggle to provide to their boards. You know, that value, that measure that is going to prevent, to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So the question as a vendor that we get with customers is very oriented on products. And that's something that we normally try to change the subject of conversation, right? The product is very important, but the product is as important as how you put your process and the people that is using the product to kind of protect the organization. The product is not going to give you everything. There's no silver bullet in cybersecurity. So the conversation needs to be handled on the strategy, and needs to be when you align that metric that you can capture to produce the value that your board expects to see. I like to say that, you know, when you present this information to the board, they don't care about how many events your firewall is stopping, right? That doesn't mean absolutely anything to them. What they care is about how much risk you are reducing with the work that you are doing. And that's why, you know, Rosha and I work on this again every week. We have to define important measures that make sense to the target audience. And you have to have your IT operations measures, up, down, those type of things that they have to pretty much evaluate and keep track, and the amount of firewall events is important for them. But then you have to have some relation between that and what you present to your board.
Yeah.
And that needs to be very clear, very well aligned, and you have to track it so you can produce the value and at the very end get the funds to protect your organization.
Yeah, it's hard to prove a negative, right? It's hard to actually show them, well, this is everything that we stopped, because you're not sure what you stopped. But getting everything aligned that way, and once again, being organized and quantifiable. These are some common things that I'm hearing. Rick, what are you hearing with people that you're working with in the OT industry and others?
Well, I'll speak across the IT/OT transom, and it's interesting. If you're going to achieve cyber resilience, I think it starts with a point that I heard already, and that is understanding your cybersecurity maturity. Where are you? Understanding your pain points. I heard Roger talk about the cost of downtime. I think that's very important. You got to understand your business, and if you're going to quantify the risk, understand what it costs if you're going to be down or disrupted for any period of time. Also, I think it was Owen talked about the avoidance of trying to push a product, and then again, Andy was right lockstep with him and saying, hey, there is no silver bullet. I think the key to a lot of what we're doing today is based on trust and thinking solutions that bring an ecosystem flavor into it, so that you start to think about partnerships, trust, and then you start to think about solution longevity. I know when I'm working with an OT client, they're not interested in a rip and replace. They want us to come in, first understand where their pain points are, where their gaps are, and start to think about how we can use our technology alliance to build on what they're doing and take them on a journey to get to where they want to be, ideally. Three threads I'll pull quickly, and I think they're the common denominator whether you're talking IT or OT, and that is, I'm working with a client to try and solve a problem. They want to make sure that what I'm delivering is transparent. And by what I mean by that is it's not incurring latency. And OT, that's particularly important. They also want to ensure it's scalable, because the dynamic of what we're doing is changing fast. The number of devices we're having to tag into, the sensors we're pulling from, means you better be situationally aware and better have a level of trust. We hear zero trust network access spoken of frequently today. It seems to be the common point. And then speed is the other element. If you're designing it in, you better be able to gain that automated awareness, because if I'm going to disrupt the kill chain and preserve my business, I have to be able to do that at speed so that I'm sustaining my operations. So I'm doing a lot of back-end intelligence work to ensure that my readiness level is on par with the challenges that I'm facing.
Yeah, that's great. I think all good feedback from the team. We mentioned earlier about budgeting, about a lot of this moving to an OpEx model or having to have vendors involved, and there's a lot of noise. And you and you guys have made a choice to work with Meriplex on a couple of things here. But we know that we can't be all things to all people, and that you've worked with other vendors and in the space. I'd like to talk a little bit more and maybe give the audience some questions that they should be asking their security service providers. Let's start with Andy. Andy, what should our service providers be hearing from their customers? And how can the customers know that this is a good answer from their service provider?
So this is a good question. This is a question I like a lot. It's not that I create this question, but this is a good question. So first of all, this is a little bit on the philosophy about how I believe the cybersecurity services should be provided, right? So this is a little bit on the personal side about my philosophy about how these services should be provided. One is you have to believe in the products that you pick, right? So you have your portfolio, and those are the products that you pick. So you, as a customer, should ask, how do you pick those products, right? Well, that's one question. Tell me a little bit about how you pick your products, how you make sure that those products make sense. The second question is, who do you have in your team maintaining those products, and the level of certification, education that they have, right? Is these people, that is prepared, or you're getting them out of high school and putting them in front of the screen? The third question is, what happens if I pick a product that you do not support? Put them some pressure there and say, what are you going to do with that? Because at the very end, if you as a vendor support a certain amount of products and you want both of us to be successful, I really hope that the relationship from the advisory side persists. And Roger and I talked about this multiple times, and I always said, I will never tell you about the product that I do not believe. And we have here two great partners, Blue Lens and Fortinet, right? And we will not offer those products if we do not believe that those products are good for our customers. And it doesn't matter what product you have. If you have a bad product, I really hope that when you engage with your MSSP services, they will tell you that that's a bad product. And the most common area here is the antivirus, right? We have experiences with antivirus. I'm not going to name anyone that are not really very good, right? And if you tell me that you have your antivirus, I will tell you that I don't like it, and I will tell you why. And I think that that's what you should look in the service provider, someone that you can trust, someone that you can consult. Even if there are things that we don't provide to the customers, you have to be there for them.
Yeah, that partnership is really important, right? That you trust each other and can actually have the dialogue around the choices around the program. Let me pose the same question to you, Rick.
So when I'm thinking about compliance and what it means to achieve a cybersecurity strategy, we're building on trust. You heard me mention that point before, and I'm typically thinking about how do I integrate. One of the things that's been popular as long as I've been part of Fortinet is this idea of a technology alliance. So you're building trust. So whether I'm talking about working with a threat intelligence vendor, whether I'm using our security fabric suite, whether I'm talking about a control vendor or a GSI, I'm building trust based on a knowledge of what it is that the client needs, what I need to be able to sustain, and you get a confidence there that you already have trust. Two, you have performance. I heard someone mention before the idea of being able to prove what you can do via POC. You've got to be able to step into the environment, showcase what can be done, and then be able to talk about the cost implication, because that can't be overlooked as well. Too often, you can sell a great idea, but if the cost doesn't fit into the model for the business, it doesn't make sense. So there has to be some scale in terms of cost as well.
All great points. I think that really sums it up right there, is that there has to be demonstrated skill in a POC. There has to be some trust there and a partnership. And those are the good things to look for in the relationships with your vendors. Thanks for all of that. We're running into the fourth quarter of the game here, And we've been mentioning compliance here and there. We've been hinting at it, different states. Let's go ahead and hit this head on. Owen, you're in the banking industry. Why don't you give us, how you've seen compliance change over your tenure with Moody Bank for 14 years? What was it like 14 years ago, and what's it like today?
It is night and day different. It's amazing. I'll tell you, I was in banking in the 90s, and we would have audits then, and an audit, I'd get 2 a year, and they'd last 2 days, IT audit. This is 96, 97, 99, and that was it. So maybe a week of my time was spent on audits. This year I've had 3 audits. They last from 4 to 6 weeks each. So that's 3 to 4 months of time that I've got auditors. It's all remote this year. That's been the nice thing. I don't have to house them. But I've got to field questions and get documents together. And then the nice thing, they'll ask for a lot of the same stuff. So once you've collected it for one, you've got 90% of it from the next one down the line.
You can pull it out of your 420 tab.
One of the things they ask for is that they want to see that we've completed that. It's an annual requirement. So yeah, there's just been so much change in the financial industry. And some of it's good. That was probably not the appropriate amount of time to spend looking at IT back in the 90s. But as the government tends to do, they kind of swing from one side of the pendulum all the way over to the other. So, they've gone to the other extreme there. But, you've got regulations because of the mortgage meltdown and things like that, the CFPB that's been created in the last 8 years or whatever, and GLBA, Sarbanes-Oxley. So just, and then there's other things that are not IT related that we have to deal with. So I have to support the other departments because they'll come in and do what they call BSA audits, the Bank Secrecy Act. Well, they want to see data. Where does the data come from? Well, it comes from our IT systems. So we have to help them extract all that data so that they can look at it and make sure we're looking at the right transactions or whatever that they want to look at. So it's just grown exponentially over the last few years. So that's a lot of what we look at. One is, a lot of requirements around information security, like GLBA, Graham Leach Bliley. We've got to protect customer information. So we've got to put in the systems to do that. But then there's other systems that we just have to implement to comply with these other regulations that are not necessarily IT related. They're just data collection systems that we have to comply with certain regulations.
Business drives a lot of that, right? Just the nature of moving to more online banking and more automation in the.
Yeah, think of the last time you came into a bank, you had to go into a bank. Now it's mobile. They do image deposits on your phone. So
do it all on my phone. Yeah.
As in a lot of industries, technology is driving where the industry is going, and that'll continue.
Yeah,
absolutely. Roger, how about the engineering vertical? Have you seen any compliance creep into what you're doing?
Interestingly enough, until about a year ago, which is actually what triggered me to reach out to Meriplex and ultimately Andy, there was no contractual compliance obligations that we really had. And then last September or October, somewhere around there, our largest client, which is TxDOT, sent us an attachment to our master contract, and it outlined a whole lot of security compliance that we needed to comply with. And frankly, I was smart enough to know that I'm not smart enough to know what they want me to do. So I called in for help, and so Andy and I partnered together, and we went through and we figured out the best framework for us to use to implement a security program, and that's what we've done and are continuing to do. What does make us unique is the way we do business. Is if we're awarded a contract, we typically are teaming with other companies to deliver the service. So these other companies will be directly accessing the data that we're hosting and the design files that we're producing. And so now that adds another complexity because we're still required to comply with TxDOT's security expectations.
Yep.
Even for the folks that are not employed by us, that are helping with the work. So we're in the process of working essentially a vetting process, a questionnaire really that we'll have folks fill out that want to team with us, and then we're going to get that down to basically a risk score where we think they feel, where they fall. And then ultimately, it potentially will change the way we do business because it may be that there's a partner out there that needs to make some improvements in their security. We are hoping that we're going to be kind of the security leaders in our industry and security advocates. And our goal is to elevate the security maturity of the industry.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's great to be a leader in your industry, whenever possible. Obviously, we're always looking for competitive advantage in our verticals and whatnot. And security is on everybody's mind. Cybersecurity, whether it's personal or privacy or whatever it may be, I think that's a great strategy by Aguirre and Fields. Rick, on the vendor side and product development side with Fortinet, and the increased need for auditing and compliance, how are you seeing products adapt to that?
So it's a really interesting question. I almost want to flip it because it isn't about buying a product and being compliant. I think there's that misnomer. If someone believes they can plug and play and all of a sudden check the boxes and they're compliant, they just made the first mistake. I really like what Roger was saying. I wanted to foot stomp that one. I like the idea of a vetting process so you characterize risk, kind of understanding yourself first, because when you step into the compliance requirements, say NERC CIP as an example, not all of that is security product oriented. I mean, you can strip it back and say, well, yeah, there's a component of it that's security management, there's personnel training, there's information protection, supply chain risk management. All those elements are important, but you're not going to plug a particular product in specifically to say, okay, yeah, I've checked that box. It really is understanding information flow, understanding what it means to build that security framework. And I would point any client to that first. Really establishing a cybersecurity framework is very important, because then you can start to look at that entire circumference, right? From the identification to protection, detection, response and recovery, and then look at the complete cycle, because all of that's going to knit into your compliance requirements anyway. So you build that vetting process, that characterization of risk by going 360 and building a continuous trust assessment, as opposed to trying to patch.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It's definitely not a product-centric problem. We want to have good products to support those efforts that you described, to be able to get you the technical solutions that you need. But it's really about a culture. It's about process. Andy loves process. Andy, on the managed services side of the industry, right? Have you seen anything change that way when it comes to compliance? I know that you and Roger are working on some really good stuff when it comes to putting a framework there. What else are you seeing?
So honestly, the biggest change I think is coming related to compliance will be on the privacy sector. I think that we have seen, different states doing kind of a little bit of different approach on this, which will be a lot of fun for us that we do work in this field. But I think that's what's coming. With the new California Act this year in effect, I think that's where I would say that the much maturity compliance impacting pretty much all the verticals are going to come this way. There was a session these days on Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a reference in the Houston area for privacy. She and I talk about this, and as we all have this, the cybersecurity program. I see coming very soon that every company will have to have a privacy program in place, and I really hope that it is going to be something that's more federal, more national, that we all kind of get in better alignment instead of each state doing whatever they want, because as you can imagine, that will be really, really complicated for us to deploy. And again, we have seen that in Europe not long ago with GDPR, right? If all those countries can get together and make sense with this, I hope that our states can come together and have a single privacy, because I honestly think that that's coming to all of us.
Yeah, it's a great point, Andy, on privacy. Certainly front and center today with, obviously the buying and selling of data, the hacking of individual data and where it's at right now. It's truly capturing a lot of the headlines up there with some of those other, breaches here recently on ransomware and whatnot. We could talk about this stuff for days, but we've got an hour and we're wrapping this up. I think it's important that we thank all of our panelists. Thank you, Owen, Roger, for coming on. Rick, for your expertise. We really appreciate it and the partnership. And of course, getting any of Andy's time. They actually billed me internally for his time as well. So I'll have a large bill for Andy's time on this as well. But we really appreciate you guys sharing your valuable insight and spending your valuable time sharing with the cyber security community your experiences and helping us all try to get through this just a little bit better.